Welcome to Pivot System Admin Training. So we are just going to review some of the different settings in Pivot. So to start with, when you log into Pivot, in the top right corner of your screen, you're going to see your name. If you click on the circle right beside your name, it will open up your profile page where you are able to upload a profile picture and see your user role. You would also be able to change your password if you are using database authentication. If you're using LDAP or Google authentication, you will not be able to change your password. The bubble up above the profile image notifies you of any Pivot system changes. If you click on that bubble, you can see our historical changes in our change log. The bell shows personal notifications. So if you're an evaluator, maybe you would have a notification that a growth plan is waiting approval. The question mark takes you to our Pivot knowledge base, and all users except for students have this question mark and access to our knowledge base. Here you're able to search by a keyword or view our module on the left, and all of the guides are listed here under Pivot District Admin that we're going to discuss today. If at any time throughout the school year you have questions, please notice that our phone number and email address is listed here on this page as well. If you email the Pivot address listed here, it will automatically create a help desk ticket. So now only Pivot admins have this gear icon right here at the top. So I'm going to click that, and when you click that, you are given 2 additional menu ribbons. So the first area I'm going to discuss is General and Options. And you really do not need to change anything in this area unless you maybe want to check the last time that your sync has ran. You can also run a manual sync from this screen. And you can just kind of see how your site is set up. School calendar is very important. This is how when Pivot would know to roll over to the next school year. We have been adding a school calendar to Pivot sites based on how your current school calendar is added, but you have the ability to adjust these dates throughout the year. So if you need to continue the school year out past July 1st, you can just click in there and extend it out. Or you can shorten it if you want to roll over to the next school year sooner. And when you're ready to add that school calendar for the next year, you just click the Add. Okay, this add here would add a grading period. And these grading periods are not as important unless it is for reporting purposes. So they don't have to match your school calendar exactly. You're going to probably spend most of your time in this Users Manage area. So you are able to add a new user account from here. You can export all the accounts that are already in your Pivot site to a CSV file. You can search by first name or last name. If you have disabled users in your site, if you check this box, they would be displayed in italicized print in alphabetical order with your other users. You can also filter here by user role. And then you're able to sort these columns ascending or descending. Anytime that you see a pencil in Pivot, you can edit. So I'm going to go ahead and click Edit. And this is what a user account looks like. They have a first name, a last name, email address, and a username. Those are all required information. We have user key, so for staff, that would be their staff personnel number. For students, it would be their student test number. We have user type. A teacher has access to only their student information. A super user would have access to every student in that building. And an administrator would have access to everything in the district and these additional menu ribbons for the settings in Pivot. If you use Google Authentication or LDAP, that is going to rule the user role types. So you would adjust user roles for those two authentication types in your Active Directory or the permission groups in Google. You can set it in Pivot, but that Active Directory and Google permission groups is going to overrule whatever you have in Pivot. If you're using database authentication, then you can set that in Pivot without issue. Whenever a user leaves your district, you can disable their account. We recommend that you disable instead of delete their account. That way their historical data lives in Pivot. And we also know that students and teachers sometimes come and go. And so if a user would return to your district, it's very easy just to switch them back to enable. Here are buildings that you can assign. To assign multiple buildings, you would hold down Control or Command and click to assign multiple buildings. So here we have the username. And if you're using database authentication, you could change the password for a user as well. If you are in Indiana, you can decide if your evaluators have access to only view observations or evaluations, or if they can perform evaluations. If they can manage or inspect assessment areas, those benchmarks, you would say yes or no. And also, can they manage student plans like those templates, yes or no? When you're done creating or editing a user account, you would want to make sure and click Update User. One other feature that you have as a Pivot administrator is you are able to log in as a user in your Pivot site. So if this teacher had a question about what they were seeing or not seeing in Pivot, you can click this black ghost icon, and then you will be logged in as that user. And you'll notice in the top right corner, the username then becomes that staff member. And then you're able to view things just as that teacher or user would view them. When you're done viewing things as that user, you can click Log Out and you'll be returned to your login. Now let's take a look at the login report. This is a very simple, basic report. If you want to get a feel of how much activity is happening in your Pivot site, you can sort here, ascending or descending, all these different columns. You can filter out by name, search for a name, filter by a building or a user role. But this just gives you a report of who was logging in and when. And you can export this to a CSV as well. So now I'm under the test area. So if you are managing your own data in the data warehouse, this is where you would go to import that testing data. Feel free, though, to contact us anytime that you would like for us to manage that for you. We would love to handle all of your data, just to take one thing off of your plate. If you would like, though, you can import it yourself. You can also click Manage here. And then you would be able to turn off or turn on those tabs in the data warehouse. So if you are no longer seeing or want to see ACT results or see that tab on the View by Test area, you can turn that off. Now let's take a look at evaluations. The settings that you see here are settings that will affect your entire Pivot site. So just a few of these settings I want to point out. Allow observation sharing, yes or no. Default evaluator assignment. So if you were to get a new evaluator, do you want them to have access to no staff until they set it? Or do you want them to have access to everyone in the district until they set it? And then also allow evaluators to set their own staff to observe or evaluate. Sometimes we have maybe like human resource departments that like to assign staff to certain evaluators. Now let's take a look at rubrics. In this area, you will see all the rubrics that are listed in your Pivot site. Take a look at this status column and you'll see that some are enabled, some are disabled. So you have the ability to make them available for your evaluators or not. And you also have the ability to edit or to delete rubrics or to create a brand new rubric. I will click the pencil here to edit. So I could make a change here if I wanted to, and then I would click update. I'm also able to duplicate the rubric. So maybe I want to create a new rubric, but just change a little bit of the information, and I could rename it then a different name. So I could start off by doing duplicate, and that way I don't have to build the entire rubric from scratch. Here is where you would disable the rubric. If it is already disabled, this becomes enable rubric, so you can turn it off or on right here. Notice that not all of these rubrics have trash cans available, and that means there is data attached. So if you no longer want to use a rubric and it has data attached, then you would just go in and disable the rubric. Let's click on Evaluators. This screen just lists all the users in your Pivot site that are evaluators or view-only evaluators. And you will notice that we have an account in here as an evaluator as well. Evaluator staff. So this area is where the Pivot administrator can adjust evaluator staff for the evaluator. To start with, you would select the evaluator. Then you can search here, and this search bar only searches already assigned staff members. So if an evaluator was trying to add a new teacher, they would need to go to this green add. And here you can filter by building, you can mass select, or you can just select a few individuals. Then click assign, and then they'll be populated here. So you can search by first name or by last name. Then you can select next to users if you need to edit their account in any way, or you can mass select again. You can also sort these columns ascending or descending if you would like by clicking on them. But once you have some users selected, notice you have some choices over here. You can be the primary or secondary evaluator. The secondary evaluator, though, cannot see any other observations or evaluations that are performed by other evaluators, and they can only perform an observation, not evaluations. So we typically recommend that if somebody's going to be a secondary evaluator, it might be like a peer observation. And so we would encourage to have administrators be primary evaluators. This red person here means you can remove them from your staff list. Okay, staff rubrics. This is a totally optional area in Pivot. What you can do is you select the rubric and then you can assign the staff members that should be evaluated using that rubric. So currently in the site, your evaluators would select the rubric when they select the staff member. If you don't want to give the evaluators that option to choose the rubric, you can set it for them here. The documents page is where all documents in your Pivot site will live. So you can search here by document name. If you're looking for a particular document, you can download them. You can look at the web link that is listed. You can create a new document here. You as the Pivot administrator have a special ability though. Let me go ahead and click on this document. You can assign it to certain staff members. So you would go through and you could assign it to certain ones, or you could assign it to certain groups of users and then click update. And then when they go to their documents page and go to district documents, they'll see what you sent them. Staff groups. This is the area that you would create or update for those summative components at the end of the school year. You can edit a current component. Notice there's no trash can, so that means there is data attached to this group. So if I don't want to use group 1 anymore, then I would click here to disable that. And then you can just click it again to make it active. You can delete groups that do not have data attached, and you can edit or add a brand new staff group. And to do that, you just give it a name and a description. Click Add, and then you add the components. So you select here and give it a weight. If a component is not listed here that you want, I'll show you here in the summative settings in just a moment how to add that. But let me go ahead and just add this. So it is calculating and we want this to be 100%. So we will save and return. Click on summative settings here. And this is the area that you can add a school-wide learning score if your district does that. But here is where you would add summative components. And it is just a text box. So you give it a name, an abbreviation, and a description, click add, and then it would populate in that drop down for editing the components. Now let's look at daily assessments. From this screen here, you will see your default benchmark scores and also sync class enrollment. This will be the most important thing on the page. If it is turned off, that means your district is using manual classes. You're creating your own classes, you're managing your own enrollment. If that is turned on, anything that is on your roster file, that sync that we are doing with your SIS, your classes are automatically populated and enrollment is managed based on that file. You can also run a daily assessment sync. So if a change has been made to that roster file and we've already ran the SIS sync, then you can click manual sync and that updates the classes in daily assessments. Student plans. In this area, you can search for the templates. You can also turn off a template if you don't want somebody to use that one anymore. You can view them, duplicate them. You can edit them if there's no data. Again, you can delete them if there's no data attached. You can create a brand new template. Here are the tools, and you have the ability to enable, edit, and delete, create a new strategy, and also new accommodations, and reason for referrals. So this concludes our Pivot System Administrator overview. There are a lot more settings and information available in Pivot. If you need a little more assistance, please contact us at pivot@5startech.com. We would be happy to set up a meeting with you to go over your district's needs or also just to answer any questions. We hope you have a great school year.